Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Boston Plastic Recycling webinar series. I'm Carolina Mejia, Innovation Project Manager from Mondragon Corporation and co-leader from the dissemination and communication activities of the European project Primus. We had some issues from the recording site. Hopefully you are listening to us right now. Please write in the chat if you are listening to the webinar right now. So today I'm going to host the first chapter of the webinar series related with two new European regulations related to plastics. So for this job, we invited another European project called CIMPA, and with their help, expertise, and knowledge, we will explain the food contact regulation and packaging waste regulation. So the structure of the webinar can be found in the right part of the screen. So you can see that the first part we will have a description of the objectives. Thank you for your answer. You can hear us. Some objectives and introductions of this webinar. Then afterwards, we are going to explain why CIMPA and Primus are collaborating in this webinar, and our various coordinators will present the objectives and activities of each of the projects. Afterwards, Matilde Tabot will present the new food contact regulation. Afterwards, Maria Vera Duran will present the packaging and packaging waste regulation. And at 11, we will have a roundtable to further understand the impact of the regulations in future developments in plastic recycled products and for the circular economy. So thank you to our four speakers today. We have, and they have the camera on, we have Attendee from BTT, Céline Chevalier from IPC, Matilde Tabot from Plastic Recycling Europe, and Maria Vera Duran from EURIC. Thank you all for being here. So to further explain a little bit more the objective of this type of webinar, the Boosting Plastic Recycling is a series of webinars focused on unraveling the latest updates and good practices of plastic recycling. So the Primus project that is funded by the European Union, we are coordinating this webinar series with the collaboration of other R&D projects, and will present innovation that will and are shaping the future of a circular economy for plastics. So for this first chapter, we will have a deeper look at the food contact regulation and the packaging and packaging waste regulation with the expertise of Matilde Tabot from Plastic Recycling Europe and Maria Vera Duran from European Recycling Industry Confederation, EURIC. So as I told you before, today's webinar will be presented by Primus project as a host project and CIMPA project as a European guest project. So why are we gathering forces among Primus and CIMPA? Well, both projects are funded by the European Union and they have similar objectives. Both they want to turn waste streams into a fully circular model, and both want to develop a recycling value chain for post-industrial and post-consumer. They also want to improve the plastic sorting process as well as the mechanical and chemical recycling. And both are working on the decontamination pre-treatment to eliminate hazard substances. They also produce new technically and safety compliant recycled materials to use in high added value products and other components. And they also respond to the European Plastic Strategy and the Circular Economy Action Plan, and therefore to the European Green Deal. So to explain a little bit more the objectives of each of the projects, I welcome Ana Tenhunen Lunka as our Primus project coordinator. Anna works as a senior scientist and project manager at VTT, and she is experienced in R&D, environmental and chemical process engineering. Her research is focused on sustainable circular economy and material and product circulation, as well as operational environments to support the scale-up and implementation of systemic and technical solutions. From the other side, from our guest today, the CIMPA project, Celine Chevalier is CIMPA's coordinator, and she is experienced in plastic material development. After an engineering degree, she did her PhD around recycling rigid parts coming from waste of electronics and electric equipment. She worked during 6 years in the new product development team of Multibase, and now is project leader at IPC on eco-circular materials project especially. So they will be presenting both projects' objectives. First, Primus project with Anna, and afterwards Celine. So Anna, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Carolina. Hopefully, I think I managed to take control of your screen. So
yes.
Good afternoon to everybody also, or morning in some parts, but daytime to everybody on my behalf also. Great to have so many of you online, and great thanks to Carolina for all the preparations and organizational work. So Primus, we are of course an EU project, and we're really focusing on improving the plastic circularity, giving new or developing new technologies in the recycling and pretreatment space for the purposes of recycling industry. And we're focusing on the automotive and home appliances applications. So throughout our project, we have these 4 Primus demo cases that we're focusing on. And the aim is to have high quality, safe, very well functioning, high performance recyclates that are incorporated into these applications. So we have automotive interior elements as one demo case. Then automotive cooling circuits. We can imagine that there are also quite a lot of requirements from the chemical side here. And then we have this food contact demonstration, where the aim is to take materials from refrigerators back to refrigerators. So we're really looking at being able to create the inner lining of the refrigerator that comes into food contact. Then the 4th demonstration is this washing machine door seal. So utilizing this type of material that currently is not recycled in new applications. So in a nutshell, we started last year in May, so we're about a little bit under 1 year into the project so far. We are a 3-year project. Our total budget is a little bit under 7 million euros, and we aim to take the different technological approaches that we're developing from TRL level 3 to 6. We have 10 partners in the project and 2 affiliated entities. So VTT is coordinating the project altogether. Then we have Circularize, focus on blockchain, Tallinn University, focusing on social sciences, social studies, University of Eastern Finland, really focusing on analytics, developing depromination technologies, Meyer as an OEM in the automotive industry, their Technical Research Center as an affiliated entity. Green Delta is a sustainability company, a sustainability assessment company. Sicauto, also another OEM, and their research organization. Carolina's organization, Mondragon, great at communication, dissemination, exploitation activities. Mathilde from Plastics Recyclers Europe. And also we have Coolrec as a recycler involved. So we're spaced out through Europe quite nicely. Then just to recap on what we aim to do or what our objectives are. So we're really looking at increasing the sustainable use and production of high quality, safe, circular plastic recyclates, and aim to put them into added value, high value products. And we're focusing also on these traceability aspects to increase the transparency across the plastics value chain. So what we want is to create high quality, safe recyclates, support the use of these recycled plastics as safe raw materials. Demonstrate this in 4 novel demo cases that I explained. And finally, support the development of the recycled market and bring about these depromination pretreatment technologies that we're developing and improved sampling and analytics activities. We have these industry and citizen communities that we welcome you to join. So I think, Carolina, you can probably post in the chat some links which you can follow to be the first one to know what we're doing in our project. But that was maybe my short and sweet about Primus. Like I said, warm welcome to everybody online today. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I think this is my turn to present CIMPA. So thank you, Carolina, and thank you, Primus, to invite us to join this webinar. We are glad to do it. So very quickly, the CIMPA project. So CIMPA stands for a circular multilayer plastic approach for value retention of end-life multilayer films, meaning that our goal is to turn multi-material multilayer film waste into valuable and circular resources. So we will focus on the CIMPA project of the recycling of multilayer films coming from food contact food packaging and agricultural films. In a nutshell, we started a year before Primus, actually, so we are in about the middle of the project. So it will end in a bit less than 1 year and a half, and we have a budget a little bit less than 5 million euros. We have 13 organizations in our consortium. So we have some sorting equipment manufacturers, Pelinck in France. We have also Paprec, that is a waste collector in France. We have 3 film producers, so Legatec, Eversia, and Barbier. We are some RTOs, so VTT in Finland, Emplacing in Spain, and of course IPC, TNO in Netherlands, and of course IPC where I worked, which are coordinator of this project. And we also have some help from Prospects Institute about in Netherlands about the citizen acceptation of recycling. We also have some help on the coordination with Benkei, and of course we have Uric in our consortium where Maria is working, and they are dealing with the dissemination, exploitation, and normative studies within the project. And I forgot Filigrade in Netherlands too, which who are working on the digital watermarking of film in order to improve the sorting. So very quickly, just for you to have visual example of what we are dealing with in CIMPA, here you can see a lot of food packagings. So all of these example are multi-layer and multi-material packaging because now for eco-design we see more and more multi-layer monomaterial packaging. We are focusing in the multi-layer packaging, and for agricultural films, they are mostly used in silage and fumigation application. A very busy slide, but just for you to see the whole value chain we are trying to put on within CIMPA. So starting from the waste on the top, we are working on the sorting. So with Pelinck, which is an equipment manufacturer, a sorting equipment manufacturer, and Filigrade to try to have some digital watermarking and improve the sorting of such multi-layer, multi-material packaging and agricultural films. Then we are working on the decontamination of the waste in order to try to go back to food contact after the recycling. We are working on 2 ways of recycling, mechanical and physical. So physical recycling, it's based on dissolution precipitation processes. After that, a valorization to stabilize and improve the properties of the recyclates, so mechanical compatibilization, rheological properties. Sorry. And then we are working on the reintroduction of the original market where the film are coming from. So we are trying to work on the whole value chain of such waste we are collecting. So if you have some question, please write them on the chat. There will be, as Carolina presented, attendee question session at the end of the meeting. So we will take care that to answer to most and maybe all of your question there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Selena and Anna. It's quite clear the objectives. We have some questions, but we will answer those questions at the end of the webinar, or maybe if Selena or Anna want to write down the answers in the chat, that's another option as well. So we will continue now with the next part of our webinar structure. So now we are going to present the two regulations. The first one, the food contact regulation, and the packaging and packaging waste regulation. So I'm going to introduce Matilde Tava and Maria Vera Duran quickly, their bios. So first, Matilde, she's our Primus regulatory work package leader, and she holds a master in chemical engineering specialized in materials and processors. Her graduation research on the development of PP recyclates from old households appliances led her to the plastic recycling world. After working as a plastic engineer at WE Recycling Facility, she is now focused on the chemical legislations as well as on R&D projects at Plastic Recycling Europe. Welcome and thank you for being here, Matilde. And on the other side, from CIMPA's project, we have Maria Vera Duran. She is CIMPA's regulatory work package leader as well. And she holds a master's degree in chemical engineering and an MBA from the University of Malaga. She worked as project coordinator at the University of Malaga for almost 5 years, where she contributed to projects on excellence and internationalization strategy. In 2021, she joined EURIC as a project officer. Welcome, Maria, and thank you for being here. So first of all, we will have the food contact regulation presented by Matilde, and afterwards, the PPW regulation presented by Maria. So please, Matilde, grab the presentation and the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Carolina, for the introduction. And of course, good morning, everyone. I'm very glad to be here today. I will present the food contact regulation, the new one, the 2022-1616, to bring you a little bit some insight into this new regulation, so you can try to grasp the concept and also the opportunities for development of recycled plastic intended to be in contact with food. If we look a little bit first at the structure of the regulation, and if we take a step back into all the legislation that are in food contact, if we take the main one first, this is the 1935-2004. This is the one that set the general safety rule for food contact material. And this one includes all type of materials, so not only plastic, but also other material. And it sets those general rules not to endanger the human health, not to bring about an unacceptable change in the composition of the food, and not to bring about a deterioration in the organoleptic characteristic of the material. It means the smell of the food, for example, so not to change the smell or the taste of the food. And within this regulation, you have an Annex 1 that lists the possibility to have specific legislation on specific material. And this has been done for plastic. And then we have other regulation focusing only on plastic then, which is the plastic regulation, the 10/2011, which has a list with substances, which is called the union list, in which you have specific migration limit for those substances. And this is a legislation that is necessary to be complied with if you put a plastic or a recycled plastic on the market into a food contact application. And we have the new one, which is the focus of today. So before it was called the 282/2008, but this one was repealed and replaced by the regulation 2022/1616, which is the one that we are going to talk about today. And this is focusing on plastic recycling processes and material that are to be in contact with food. Next slide. Let's look at the objective of this new regulation. The first objective is to ensure that the plastic and this recycled plastic is safe for food contact. That's the key requirement, let's say. This legislation does not only focus on the output, but also of the decontamination technology that is placed. It means that it really focuses on the entire recycling process and not only on the output and the recycled plastic. This regulation has a broad scope, so it includes all recycling processes. The idea here was that the previous regulation was focused on certain polymer and certain processes. And this new regulation is there to have a broader scope and to include also not only the processes that are like available at industrial scale at tea time, but also to look in the future and include processes that are not yet developed. And that's one main idea. So we will have a regulation that is quite flexible and can also go towards new processes. There is new definition that have been created for this specific regulation. We'll see afterwards. So it's to be understood that the definition that are within this regulation are very focused on this regulation and do not apply outside of the scope of this legislation. It includes some specific point on enforcement and also evaluation. So to have more control and more enforcement of this regulation. And it's also an objective to bring a transparent system with what they call a public register. So with a lot of information that will be public, especially regarding material and companies that are registered to produce this type of material. When we look at the scope of this new regulation, and this is quite brand new, let's say, so this regulation will cover all recycling processes that produce a material or an article intended to come into contact with foods. It means that it will include several processes that are listed just a little bit down in the slide. So it includes the chemical recycling processes, physical recycling processes. By physical recycling processes, it includes, for example, dissolution, mechanical recycling, of course, closed loop recycling, and also the first point, which is the functional barrier. This is also new because before, within the regulation 282/2008, the functional barrier were not included. But now any structure that is ABA and in your B layer contains a recycled plastic will have to go through this new regulation, and especially the path that they call the novel technology, but that we will see a little bit afterwards. The regulation is already entered into force, and this has entered into force the 10th of October 2022. It means it's already applicable. There is a few transition periods in the meantime, but still most of the regulation is applicable. It includes all types of waste, so therefore post-consumer, but also pre-consumer waste, and it covers all polymers. So not only PET, it was really the focus of before, but really all polymers are included within this scope. Let's look at the scope and the definition. So we have a really broad scope within this regulation. because it sets requirements not only for the output or the decontamination technology, but really the entire value chain of the plastic recycling. So it really starts from the collection till the recycled plastic material and article. It means really the article in the end that is placed on the market. Then we have some specific definition here. Those definitions are to be understood, especially for this regulation. We know that there is a few conflicts of definition between the different legislation. So it's important that those ones are only understood for this legislation and not another one. So here the pre-processing activity are really concerning any type of grinding, sorting, washing of the material, and then you obtain a plastic input. And this is going into a decontamination technology, which is meant to decontaminate the material in order to have a recycled plastic. And then this recycled plastic is going through post-processing activities, means either converting activities or to make a final article. And this is when you obtain the recycled plastic materials and articles. So this is the scope of the regulation and the definition. Now let's look a little bit deeper into those different steps, and let's start with the collection of the plastic waste. When we look at this, there is new incentives that have been placed. This is related to the Article 6 of the regulation, where there is requirements for collection and pre-processing activities. Pre-processing activity, as I say, being grinding, shredding, washing, sorting, those type of recycling activities. And then there is specific incentive on where the material should come from, and especially that it should be separately collected. So this is a new point of the regulation that is very important. It means that in order to be processed afterwards, the material needs to be separately collected. It means that if the plastic waste is coming from residual waste, for example, so not being separately collected, then this one would need a derogation in order to be used into food contact processes and application. Therefore, this is very important, either to improve those collection systems so that the input can be separately collected, or if not possible, then to apply for novel technology in order to have a derogation for this specific incentive here. It means that if the plastic are separately collected with other packaging fraction, namely metal, paper, glass, it's still considered separately collected from the residual waste. So this is a very important incentive because it's really boosting an improvement of the collection systems. Now we are going to look on one of the main terms that are described within this regulation is the suitable or novel technology. When we look at those two types of technology, they're defined specifically for this regulation. The first one is called the suitable technology. They're defined as technology where sufficient data has been generated in order to have a fast path for approval. For this, we have two technologies that are currently listed within the Annex 1 of the regulation. This is where they list the suitable technology. We have the post-consumer mechanical PET recycling and the recycling from product loops, which are in a closed and controlled chain. It means technically what we call commonly, let's say, the closed loop recycling. So those two technology, they have a fast path for approval and a specific process. It means that in order to have approval for this type of technology, it's taking usually less than a year. And then we have other technology, which are called novel technology within this regulation. And these ones are technology that are not yet listed as suitable because the legislator considered that there is not sufficient data that has been generated on those processes. And therefore, they're requiring more data, and this process is meant to be done on, let's say, a monitoring of the different data to generate more and more data on the long term before having an assessment of EFSA, which is the European Food Safety Agency. So this path can take a little bit longer because it's 2 to 7 years before your dossier is being evaluated by the Food Safety Agency. So when we look at this process a little bit into more detail, this is what we have. So we take the development of a novel technology. It can be, for example, mechanical recycling of polyolefins. It can be some specific dissolution processes, mechanical recycling of polystyrene. So all those type of process that are not yet listed as suitable. And then the process starts. So first you have the first generation of data points, and this is included in what we call a notification report. Then you have, through time, the generation of more data, especially considering the monitoring of the contaminants, which is written in the Article 13 of the regulation. And then you can have some delay. So if the Commission and the competent authority judge that there is not sufficient data in order to assess the process, they can request for some delays. And this is why this process can take a little bit longer, because the assessment can be extended until 7 years, and this is the latest date that it will reach, let's say. And at the end of this process, they will define whether the process can be listed as suitable. Then it will be added to the Annex 1, and then you will have again a fast path for approval because it will no longer be a novel technology. Or there is also the possibility that the process is not approved, or that they do require another application with some changes in order to be listed as suitable. What you have to understand in the meantime is that as soon as you submit the notification report and this notification report is checked and approved, the material in the meantime can be placed into a food contact application without having NFSA approval. So this is also a novel point here, is that in the meantime, you can still sell this material into a food contact application. So this is in a nutshell how the system is working. This is quite a complex system, but this is, let's say, the interlink between the suitable technology and the novel technology. Now, if we look at the potential opportunity of this regulation, and especially the opportunity in order to develop new processes, so to focus a little bit on the novel technology, this is what we are looking for in the European Primus project, with one of the demonstrator, which is going from a refrigerator to a refrigerator. So the idea here is to take the inner liner of a fridge, which is an high impact polystyrene, and this work on two aspects. The first one is, of course, on the performance of the material in order to have recyclates that you can place back in this application that have the necessary and required mechanical properties or rheological properties. And then you have a second aspect, which is more related to this regulation, which is on the safety of the recyclates in order to be used into direct food contact for the inner liner of a fridge. And there it comes the demonstration of the novel technology path. So if we look at the path to submit an application for a novel technology, this is how it works. If we take date 0, which is the start of what they call the decontamination installation, and you take 6 months backwards, this is when you will submit the notification report. Within those 6 months, then you will have the Commission and the competent authority that will look at this dossier and check whether there is sufficient data and give you either a request to provide more data because there is not sufficiently enough data to assess the process, or they will just say, okay, this process is pre-checked and approved, and then you can start the registration of the recycler and the decontamination installation, and you can start the operation and place the material on the market. Afterwards, we have several points here, which is points that are necessary in order to follow this path. There is especially the report with the data monitoring, and this is related to the monitoring of the contaminants. To monitor the contaminants, there is a specific routine that is described in order to check which type of contaminants could be present in the input and in the output of the decontamination installation. And based on this, to take those contaminants and do a root cause analysis of where they could come from. And this whole process is then included in some reports, and those reports have to be submitted every 6 months for a minimum of 2 years. There is also specific incentive on the fact that the labs, 2 years after the entry into force, needs to perform what we call a proficiency test in order to generate data that would be representative with some harmonized analytical method. Based on this, the key point at the very beginning is really this notification report, and this is one of the point that we are focusing in the Primus project in order to provide a guidance document on how to build this notification report for especially here the fridge application. When looking at the summary of this presentation, because we come to an end of this presentation, the first thing to really keep in mind is this new regulation is really targeting a broad scope. So it includes really all recycling processes and all recycled plastic that are intended to come into contact with foods. That's very important, and that's one of the novel aspects of this new regulation. The second point is that the European legislation on food contact is ensuring a high level of safety by setting some rules from the collection till the post-processing. So it's really including the complete plastic recycling value chain. The key takeaways to understand here is that it does offer quite some opportunities in order to expand the type of recycled plastic that will be used in contact with food, because there is an opportunity to apply for novel processes that have not been approved in the past with this process of monitoring of data. So it means that many processes that have been on hold will start to have registration process, and also it will promote the acceleration of the circular economy, because more plastic will be able to reach those food contact applications. And of course, it will also open to new applications, such as the fridge, for example, which was before a little bit more difficult to enter this type of regulation, which was the 282, which was really focused on PET. And now with this new scope, there is really the opportunity to reach more demanding product application. So with that, I would like, of course, to thank you very much for your attention. Of course, if you have some questions, I saw a lot of questions pop up. We'll try to answer them in the end of this webinar. And with this, I think I will give the floor to Maria on the packaging and packaging waste regulation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us today. I will now present the new proposal from the Commission on Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation that is very ambitious and very related to the topic of today, that is boosting plastic recycling. So I would like to start by because the reason why we are here today, the reason of this all innovative projects such as CIMPA and Primus, and also all the legislative developments are a result of the European Green Deal. This is the Green Deal for the Commission is the Europe's Man on the Moon movement. So this is a very ambitious plan, the number one strategic priority for the Commission, and it has two key pillars. First, to achieve the climate neutrality by 2050, but also to achieve the circular economy. And for that, the Circular Economy Action Plan presents some interrelated initiatives to achieve a greener and more competitive Europe. So if we analyze the current state of this on terms of emissions, for example, we learned last COP27 that we reached a new record of CO2 emissions in 2022. We know that if we
keep our consumption as we do today, by 2050, we will need 3 planets to sustain our current lifestyles. And also we know that packaging waste regeneration is growing a faster path than the population growth and the GDP growth. That's why to move to this future state, that vision from the Commission, the European Green Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan, to achieve the climate neutrality by 2050, to decouple the economic growth from the resource uses, and to foster circularity in key product value chains for packaging and plastic, we need this transition called the EU Green Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan. And to move from one state or to a future state, we need some policy tools. And 2 key policy developments are the regulation on the use of recycled plastic for food contact materials, Matilde presented already, and also the regulation on packaging and packaging waste. I'm going to focus on this regulation. This is a proposal from the Commission. It was published on the 30th of November last year, so it's not. It has some room for improvements, but it sets new requirements on packaging and packaging waste, and this includes to improve the packaging design, to increase the recyclability of packaging, and also to promote reusable packaging. It also set measures to increase the recycling content in plastic packaging, and also to tackle excessive packaging and also reduce packaging waste. So if we look at the structure, it's as I said, it's a very ambitious proposal and also a complex one. So there are like 12 chapters, but I would like to focus on 3 that I think they are relevant for this webinar. The first one is the chapter 2 that sets some sustainability requirements that all packaging products have to meet to be placed on the market, but also some labeling and market and information requirements that are harmonized across Europe. Also, there's a chapter that is also key for the transition to a circular economy, and is the management of packaging and packaging waste. We are going to present some key measures. As I said, is very ambitious, so there's a lot of measures in different topics, but some of the key ones are the recyclability definition and enforcement, also the setting of recycled content targets for plastic packaging. A new element is the packaging waste reduction targets, and also the implementation of reuse system. Also is key the collection system and deposit return systems, and also the harmonized labeling for all packaging. If we go to the first one, the recyclable packaging, we have the definition of recyclable, with the idea to make all packaging recyclable, as it was promised in the Circular Economy Action Plan. So to be considered as recyclable, packaging has to comply with different criteria. The first one is that it has to be designed for recycling. Then it has to be separately collected, sorted without in defined waste stream without affecting the recyclability of other waste stream, and also recycled to achieve quality recyclates with sufficient quality to substitute primary raw materials. But also it introduced a new concept that has to be recycled at a scale. So how the proposal is going to achieve this target? Well, these requirements will need to be met in a 2-step approach. So by 2030, all packaging has to comply with the design for recycling criteria. This design for recycling criteria has to be further developed, but at this point we know that it's going to be based in the table you can see, where there will be a recyclability performance grades with categories A, GE, depending on the assessment of the recyclability per unit. This is going to be like a traffic like a system or the energy system level. So packaging will be assessed against this criteria and will be classified in one of these categories. If packaging is classified in the category E, then it will be considered as a non-recyclable packaging, and then it will not be able to place on the market that kind of packaging. Also, these requirements will be extended, will be adjusted by 2035 for packaging to be effective, collected, sorted, and recycled to be considered recycled at scale. This recycled at scale, what does it mean? This has to be also further developed, but we know that this requirement will need to cover the collection, sorting, and recycling system, covering at least 75% of the union population. So this means that the first step is to comply with the Sign for Recycling criteria in theory, and then we by 2035 we have to see the recyclability in reality in with the capacity of the European Union on collection and sorting and recycling system. In the next slide, you can see how this will be implemented. We expect that the adoption of this new legislation on packaging and packaging waste by 2024 or 2025. Then by 2027, there will be the Design for Recycling criteria will be adopted. And by 2030, packaging has to comply with the Sign for Recycling criteria, and only category from A to D will be able to be placed on the market. Then by 2031, there will be a methodology to assess how the collection, sorting, and recycling system are implemented at a scale. And by 2035, then packaging will be recyclable at a scale. If we go to another key element of the regulation on packaging and packaging waste is the minimum recycling content targets in plastic packaging. These recycling content targets are set by different product categories. We can see the content-sensitive packaging. This will include food packaging, and there's a target for PET packaging, and then another target for other packaging than PET in this category. There's also a target of beverage bottles that is the same that the one established in the Single-Use Plastic Directive, and there's another category for non-contact sensitive or other kind of packaging. These recycling content targets are not applicable to compostable plastic packaging, and also the Commission is going to review this target after years after the entry into force for all their packaging materials, such as glass packaging, metals, cardboard packaging, and all their kind of materials. Also, it will be very important to define the methodology for the calculation and the verification of the recycling content targets, and this will be done by 2027. And also, the EPR fees, the fees that producers have to pay to comply with the standard producer responsibility system, will be modulated regarding on the percentage of the recycling content target. So those packaging that contains more recycling material, their fees will be lower. Let's talk now about the reduction and reuse targets. This is like there are different articles proposing different measures, and here we have the restriction on use of certain packaging formats. So if there will be a ban on single-use hotel miniature packaging, also in the HoReCa sector, or for less than 1.5 kilo fresh fruit and vegetable. There are different packaging formats that will be restricted on use. For the prevention of packaging waste, there also will be a target for the reduction compared to 2018, and this target will be calculated per capita. So by 2030, all member states have to reduce their generation of packaging waste in 5%. Then this will be increasing 10% and 15% by 2014. Also, there will be reuse and refill targets, which means that different sectors and packaging formats have to introduce reuse and refill system. There's also some exceptions, and here you can see there are different packaging groups and packaging materials you can see, and also sectors. So there will be a category for food and beverage in the HoReCa sector. Then also in the retail sector, there will be a reuse target on alcohol, beverage, also or water, soft drinks or juice, different categories. And also there will be a reuse target for commercial and industrial packaging. These targets for 2030 will be adjusted again for 2014. Regarding recycling targets, this is the same as the former directive. You can see here the target for recycling. Just to mention, for example, the target for plastic right now is 30. I think it's 38 or 39%. So we have to achieve a target of recycling of plastic packaging of 50% by 2050, and these targets will be also increased by 20-30%. Another also new element of the proposal is the deposit and return system, because this regulation requires that deposit return system will be mandatory for single-use plastic beverage bottles and also metal beverage containers with a capacity of up to 3 liters. Also, if member states achieve a collection rate for these packaging items above 90%, then they will be exempted to this rule. It also introduced that member states shall endeavor to establish and maintain deposit return system for other packaging items such as glass beverage bottles, beverage cartons, and for reusable packaging. But the regulation leaves the member states to take this decision on this packaging item. Also, it established minimum requirements for the for deposit and return system. If we analyze the standard producer responsibility, the EPR fees, as I mentioned before, this will be modulated on the recycling content for plastic packaging, but also on the recyclability of packaging. So regarding this table from A to D, depending on the category of the packaging, the EPR fees will be adjusted. So if the packaging is the recyclability is higher, is category E, the EPR fees will be lower. There will be also a register of producers to assess this system, and the proposal also mentions that there will be the clear and ambiguous accreditation symbol so the green dot, for example, is considered as misleading. So we'll implement rules on that as well. Regarding compostable plastic packaging, I think also a very important point, because the proposal established 4 packaging formats that must be compostable. So all the tea and coffee bags, coffee or tea single serve unit disposed with together with used coffee or tea products like coffee capsules. Also, sticky labels attached to fruit and vegetables, and very lightweight plastic carrier bar. These 4 packaging formats have to be compostable and then in industrially controlled conditions in bio-waste treatment facility. All other plastic packaging should go into recycling. There's the proposal also leaves flexibility to member states on the light plastic carrier bars, and this list is just it also only has 4 packaging formats, but this list can be amended with more packaging formats depending on if the Commission thinks that it has an added value on that. Labeling is also an important element because since this is a regulation, it will harmonize all the labeling system in Europe. So there will be a label containing information on its material composition in all packaging. So with the idea to facilitate consumer sorting, and this label will be compulsory for all packaging, and the same label will be on waste receptacles. So it will be easier to sort the packaging waste. There will be also a label on the recycling content plastic packaging. This will be voluntary, and reusable packaging have to bear a QR code, which will give information on where we can dispose or reusable packaging, and also it will be useful to calculate how many rotations or the reusable packaging can have. Important and interesting point, I think, is also the inclusion of digital marking technologies, because there will be some harmonized labeling requirements and format to identify the material composition by means of these digital marking technologies. And with this, I will just give you some information on the public consultation, because all these measures, as I said, is a proposal from the Commission, but there is a public consultation ongoing with the deadline of 20th of April. So in this period, different stakeholders can give opinion on how to improve this proposal. So all the documents, the proposal, the annexes, the impact assessment are available in this link. And I think this is a very ambitious proposal, and it leaves also the innovation projects has a role to contribute to achieve the targets of this ambitious requirement that this regulation on packaging and packaging waste will set in 2024 or 2025. And I think with this slide, I finished my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention. And we said before, we'll have some time for questions after the end of the panel discussion. We can hear you, Carolina.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have a lot of questions in the chat, so I already wrote down that we are going to try to answer all the questions at the end of the session, but if we do not have the chance to answer, we will answer all the questions in a document and then send it to the attendees. Okay, so we now have the session of the round table. We will try to do this fast enough to try to respond a lot of questions that we have in the chat. So the main idea is to gather both regulations and answer how these regulations are related with the different topics. So the first question is, and just to spice up this exercise a little bit, the first question can be answered by Matilde at first, and then Maria, and the second one vice versa. It could work like this. So the first question is why both regulations are important for future developments in plastic recycled products and for a circular economy. So Matilde.
Yeah, so on the food contact regulation, well, technically, since it's opening a lot of opportunities in order to put other recycled plastic than PET, for example, and that is the most commonly known, into food contact application, it means that it's for sure contributing to the circular economy as more recycled plastic can be put in higher quality application. So it's definitely an opening to increase the recycled plastic that can be placed on the market.
For sure, for sure. Maria? What
Yeah,
about
I
you?
think both regulation are key first to improve the recyclability of products. This is a very important first step. Then to increase, of course, the recycling rate and also increase the content of recycled product recycling materials in new products. And I think the good news is that there are regulations. So that means there is this all these criteria is going to be harmonized and at European level, and I think that will help also to accelerate that transition to a circular economy.
For sure, both regulations will support the circular economy changes in Europe, and well, we'll see how we can handle that. So for the second question, how is each regulation related to the innovation project? That I think you already answered it in your presentations, but well, just a quick summary. Maria.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
I think they are these new proposals and also the regulation. They are very very ambitious. We said that they include like very ambitious targets on recycling content for plastics and also on the recyclability that all packaging has to be recycled. And we know that this is not a reality nowadays. But Primus and CIMPA have the opportunity to contribute to achieve this target to improve the design for recycling, the recyclability of products, and also the develop new technologies for improving the sorting and recycling to increase that recycling rate of plastics and also increase the quality of recycling materials so they can be incorporated in products of added high added value, including food contact materials.
Yes, for sure. And I think, Matilda, you already relate the regulation with Primus project and the fridges in your presentation. I don't know if you want to add something else.
Well, no, technically that's Maria summarized very well the contribution of both projects. So I think we can go to the next point.
Yes, for sure. And maybe we can have just 3 questions and then start answering all the questions that we have in the chat. The third one is how this EU-funded project contribute to the EU plastic strategy, the circular economy action plan, and therefore to the Green Deal.
Yeah, so for this, so technically the project are really looking into new development, for example, with the Primus, where we are looking into those novel technology path. And since the regulation is completely new, it's also the idea to look a little bit step by step on how it can actually like recycled plastic can actually be processed through this novel technology, be approved. So it's really like a step-by-step approach. And I think by taking these actions into an EU-funded project, it's also the opportunity to build experience and then apply this experience afterwards to the industry and therefore contribute at industrial scale then to put more recycled plastic into new products.
Yes,
indeed. I think these projects are innovative projects and they develop new solutions to achieve these targets and are really necessary to contribute to the objectives set under the plastic strategy, the circular economy action plan, and also the European Green Deal. I always like to mention the example of the single-use plastic directive that I think it was the first legislation setting binding measures on the recycling content targets, for example, and this has showed that it's the only way to decorrelate prices from virgin to recycled materials, and how the recycling capacity has increased in 2 years 20 or 21%. So all these legislations had to be linked with the innovation and the improvement of the recycling capacity in Europe. And I believe they are key tools to do that.
Yes. And all the innovation EU funded projects that we are working on the plastic recycling, we can join forces, such as this webinar, to keep up with the plastic recycling activities and know how to manage in different sectors. So I will jump to the last part of our webinar and start answering the attendees' questions, because we have a lot of them. So I paste them all in one document, so I will share my screen so it will be easier for you to check the answers. So I will share my whole screen. Can you see my screen? You can see my screen, right?
Yeah, it works.
Okay, so we have 7 questions for Matilde and we have 8 questions for Maria. So maybe we can answer till now 2 or 3 from Matilde and then 2 or 3 from Maria, and then we will see if we can continue answering till the end of the webinar. So Matilde, the first one, in your opinion, what will be the first recycling processes validated to produce FCM, in addition of the current recycled PET and chemical recycling, and by when?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting question. I wish I had a crystal ball to answer this. I can give you some insight, but for sure, I don't know whether this is going to be the case or not. I think some processes in the pipeline, or for example, the mechanical recycling of polyolefins, typically, for example, PP or HDP that are currently in the pipeline. There is, of course, some application for functional barrier. So any ABA structure, for example, for styrenics and PET. Those ones are currently under the path of novel technology and will be assessed in the next month. There is also, for example, and I saw it's also linked to another question that I saw afterwards on chemical recycling. There is also some specific exception for chemical recycling in case indeed you produce a monomer that is sufficiently pure and included in the union list of 10/2011. But there is indeed some monomers that can be produced for depolymerization, for example, that are not included in this list. This is the case for depolymerization of PET, where there is BHCT that is not included in the union list and therefore is entering the path of the novel technology. So this is one of the chemical recycling process that has to apply through novel technology. And this is also one of the applications that are currently ongoing. So this is in a nutshell what I can say on this topic.
Thank you, Matilda. I think that you helped them a little bit more, even though you don't have the crystal ball, but you have different insights and perspectives. So the second question is, as for PET bottles, 30% of what is collected in Spain and about 25% of what is collected in Portugal is from residual waste. And there is France, Italy, West Europe. This means that despite 30 years of PET recyclers processing such material, derogation to Article 6, though novel technology application must be applied.
Yeah, so this is a very good point, and this is one of the problems of this regulation and this Article 6 on collection. This is why also I put one slide on this. This is indeed tricky, and many countries are currently taking some plastic that are coming from mixed residual waste. However, in what is written clearly in the regulation, this is no longer allowed. What is written for mechanical PET recycling is that the material that enters needs to be post-consumer and separately collected. Therefore, indeed, when applying strictly the regulation, it means that either you apply for novel technology and you have a derogation to take this type of input and place it into your process, provided that, of course, you can decontaminate the material afterwards. Yeah, otherwise this material cannot be used for the current process that is described in Annex 1.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question on your side. The third one. Regarding the collection, is there a limit to possibly contaminants? Example, non-food packaging collected in the PDM fraction.
So I don't know whether the question is about how to limit the contaminants in collection or whether there is, because the limit on the contaminants, let's say, it's really on the output of the recycling process in the end. So if you have contaminants, you need indeed to prove that those are not migrating above a certain threshold into the food. This is like all the point of the migration testing. And then the second point is with regard to collection, when they say in the regulation, you have to limit incidental contamination through the collection system. It means that the collection, for example, if it's separately collected, the authorities are taking the perspective that if it's separately collected, then you do limit the contamination, and therefore it will be easier to decontaminate afterwards. But as such, there is no limit on contaminants in your input fraction, because the purpose of the process is to decontaminate the material. Of course, there is, through separate collection, some materials that are forbidden. Any type of hazardous waste, for example, cannot be present, otherwise it does not qualify as separate collection. So I don't know if this answers your question. I try to grasp it, but I'm not quite sure if I understood properly.
Thank you, Matilde. It seems, and we can see that you know the regulation from all the sides. We will leave the rest of the questions to be answered in a document format, and then we will send it to the rest of the attendees. And Maria, from your side, we will read the first 3 questions if we have time. So the first one, is there a list of what plastics are recycled in practice across the EU?
Yeah, well, there is several reports on the plastics that are recycled, but for this regulation, the Commission had did an impact assessment on the recycling capacity, but also foreseen, for example, new technologies such as chemical recycling and physical recycling, dissolution, depolymerization, to calculate the recycling content targets for new plastic for the recycling content for plastic packaging. So this is based on actual data, but also an estimation of the increase on the recycling capacity by 2030 and 2040 to calculate this target. The impact assessment is available in the last slide, in the link of the last slide, so you can check what the conclusions of that report to set these requirements with this regulation.
Thank you. Thank you. So we will be sharing the presentations, and then you can access the link Maria is telling you about. The second question, if there is a PE waste stream and it went through the mechanical recycling, sorting, washing, etc., and the results shows that the migration is within the limits, can it be used as an FCM or not? I suppose not, but why not?
I think this is related to Matilde's presentation, but if you,
yes, it is.
yeah, if you want.
Yeah, then I can answer briefly this. So if you take the path of the novel technology and you demonstrate the recycled PE is safe for food contact, then of course you can use it. So this is the perspective of this regulation: is that if you prove that the material is safe, then it's possible. Also, because if you take the path of the novel technology, you can derogate the Article 6 on collection. Then it means that that you do not necessarily need to have the separate collection. So this is possible. If you prove that you have results within the migration limits for a specific intended use, then it's fine.
Thank you, Matilda. Then Maria, your second question, is there a harmonized guideline in Europe on the definition of recyclability?
Yeah, well, this regulation proposed some recyclability criteria, but it has to further develop. The proposal said that by 2027 there will be a design for recycling guidelines. So this word has to be further developed to apply by 2030. So this is the main legislation, but there's going to be secondary legislation that is going to define what are the recyclability criteria, how to measure, how to implement the sign for recycling criteria, but also how to measure recyclability at a scale. And these recyclability criteria will be for all packaging materials, not only for plastic, but of course on plastic is also recyclage has also be the methodology of recyclage has also be assessed in the impact assessment. I think there will be, we don't know yet that how it's going to be this design for recycling criteria, but we believe that it will be something similar to that methodology.
So you answered the next question. The criteria be harmonized by recyclage. That's great. So we can answer some questions more. The next one, will the EPR fees will be harmonized across EU countries by 2030?
Yeah, by 2030, the EPR fees have to be modulated on two criteria at least, and one is the recyclability performance of the packaging. That will be that EPR fee will be modulated according to the scale of recyclability, and then we know that the EPR fee will also by 2030 will be modulated on the recycling content for plastic packaging. But as I mentioned before, this will be developed in secondary legislation. This proposal sets the targets, sets the deadlines for doing this, and then there's also these details have to be developed in secondary legislation, in implementing acts, delegated acts of the regulation.
That I guess that partially answers the next question. Will the EPR schemes get a target for the quality of the recycled material? So better back to packaging rather than garter furniture, I guess, is furniture.
That will be considered in the recyclability of the packaging because the assessment on the recyclability will include the quality of the recycled materials. So this will be included in this performance in the assessment of the recyclability of packaging, and thus in the EPR schemes for the eco-modulation of the fees.
Okay, I think we already answered 5 of your questions. Maybe we could go back to Matilda. Sorry for this, but we are managing time, and we would like to answer most of the questions from both sides. So Matilda, I'm going back to you. We were here in the fourth question. Wouldn't the fridge example fall under the rule of closed loop system and hence not need a novel technology approval?
Yeah, this is a very nice question. So when we look at Annex 1 on the suitable technology and the closed loop recycling, there is one specific condition here, is that the article should not go to the consumer. Therefore, it means that for a fridge application, it would not fit because the fridge is going to the consumer house. And even if it's collected in a kind of closed loop system, it does not fit the definition of a closed loop system that is written in the regulation. So this is why this type of application has to go for novel technology and cannot fit the suitable technology as listed in Annex 1.
Thank you. Maybe we can answer another one on your site. In the food contact regulation, will the recovered polymer approved for the use in food contact application achieved at the end of waste classification and says to be a waste? Any problems for some cases?
Sorry, because I was reading before in the chat another question that I will answer just after. The end of waste, indeed, there is a little bit of conflict in the end of waste with this regulation, to be honest, because very often, I don't know if you remember the scheme that I put with the definition at the beginning, but very often what they call in this regulation the plastic input has often already reached the end of waste because it sorted flakes. So therefore, there is a little bit of a conflict of where the end of waste is actually located within this process. But technically, in any case, the polymer within, like the recycled plastic at the end, will reach the end of waste because it will have been sorted and it will meet the end of waste criteria that are listed in the Waste Framework Directive. But very often, it can be that before the decontamination installation, the material may have already reached the end of waste. So that's for this. It can be placed at different point of the process. Just another, because I saw another question in the chat that is also very relevant, is the point of the milk bottles in the UK. Whether this qualified for closed loop or not, indeed, it does not qualify for closed loop recycling. It does qualify for novel technology. Therefore, this type of process will also have to go through the novel technology. Of course, if the material is placed in the EU, because since the UK is not part of the EU, if the material is placed in the EU in those type of food contact application, then indeed it will have to go through novel technology, as it's not listed as suitable for the polyolefins.
Okay, thank you, Matilda, for answering those questions. I'm going back to Maria because I want to answer the most of the questions. Okay, so your sixth question: is there any future regulation that will define details for sortability of waste packaging?
Well, there's no any details on that, but of course the sign for recycling criteria will take into account the sortability of packaging, and also when this criteria will be further adjusted to recycle it at a scale, that will assess the sorting capacity of Europe to define what is considered as recyclable at a scale. But in the proposal, this, as mentioned before, has to be developed. There's some guidelines already in the proposal, but the details will be further developed.
And your last question. I don't know if there's some popping new questions, but then we will answer it in an offline document. So how do you think the existing waste management system, sorting system in Europe need to be developed in order to achieve what the regulation policy goals aim to achieve?
Yeah, good question. As regarding the recyclability, for example, we need to achieve the target of 2035 to all packaging has to be recycled at a scale. We need to improve, of course, the waste management system and sorting system, and that's why the proposal is setting some measures, for example, on the collection. On the collection, for example, we have the post-return system that will increase the collection for PET bottles and metal cans. So this is one of the measures to tackle to increase the collection on these packaging items. And also the sorting capacity will be assessed at European level. So member states have to report what is the capacity to develop this recycle at scale guidelines. So, but of course, it has to be if we want to achieve at high recycling recycling ready, if we want to have enough recycling materials to meet the recycling content targets, the waste management system and the sorting system is a first step. So to increase the collection and the sorted materials. So this is a real very important to meet the recycling and recycling content targets.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, Matilda. I'm going to check. I know that you have like 2 questions left, Matilda, but I think we don't have time. I'm going to collect other questions in the chat and share it with you both for to be able to answer them in an offline document, and then we will send it afterward to all the attendees. So I'm moving to the last slide of the presentation, and maybe this will be slow because I'm sharing as well, again, the whole presentation. I just wanted to remind you, well, first of all, thank our 4 speakers today, Ana, Celine, Maria, and Matilde, because all the information you gave us is really, really important and high quality, and thank you all. I think that joining our forces in Primus and CIMPA are really important and useful, and we will continue working together. But and I would like to tell all the attendees that if you want to know more about these 2 projects, you can follow both projects. I will paste as well the join the community link from the Primus project, and maybe from CIMPA, Celine, or Maria, you can paste the link for your project as well. Both projects has newsletters, and both projects are really active in social media, so you can follow us both. And if you want to learn more about this Boston Plastic Recycling webinar series, we will be creating more this year. So if you join our newsletter or join our industrial community, we will be sending the invitation afterwards. So thank you all very much for being here. Thank you to all our speakers, and we will continue creating different webinars to disseminate some of our projects results and well, collaborating with more R&D projects. Thank you all. And letting you know that we are going to share the slides to the to all the attendees, and the webinar will be posted in the Primus website, and I think that in CIMPA's social media as well. So if you are following both projects, you will see the webinar and you will be receiving the presentation in your email. And for the questions that we didn't answer, we will send a document with the answers to all your questions. So thank you all.
Thank you very much.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.